Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji. Welcome back to the Deconstructed Woman podcast. So this week, I was telling Joji that I was forced to slow down because I was recently diagnosed with a stomach ulcer, which is the first time that I had such a condition. But it really made me pause for a moment and take stock of where am I at? Am I doing too much? How full is my plate? And I can say that I knew that it was kind of getting too full, that things were starting to overflow, that I was dropping a lot of balls, if you will. But I didn't really recognize that until my body slowed me down and I had to physically stop what I was doing and really take a pause. We've talked in the last couple of episodes, over the last couple of months about mindfulness and self-care and how important that is. And I still think that that is something that I'm evolving and utilizing in my life. But I think that when stress gets to this high point, sometimes our bodies physically slow us down to really help us to reset, to help us to take stock and really check in with ourselves in kind of unusual ways. And I always try to frame it as, okay, this is a pause rather than this is something, that's hindering me. I'm trying to pause with this, but it's pretty painful way to kind of be educated on that. So Joji, you had said that this kind of resonates with you as well. So I did want to kind of dive in completely. How has this kind of impacted you in your life?
Well, I will say that it's been a consistent theme in my life. I think from the moment my mom would recall stories when I was very young about how I would have different issues. I've always had a lot of stomach issues, apparently, ever since I was probably a toddler. And so I guess it's no surprise that I grew up having ulcerative colitis in my early 20s. And then now I've been diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And so it's been a ongoing story of like my stomach holding my stress and anxiety. But outside of that, I've also had other things. I've had my hair fall out in patches and things like that. So I feel like I clearly don't listen to my body, and so my body seems to intervene when things are getting way out of control. I'm much better about it now, and a lot of those conditions have stabilized right now, and I've been, you know, haven't had a flare in a long time, which is wonderful. But it definitely is a somatic version of stress on my body, and as I was preparing for this conversation, I the articles I read really talk about the fact that since we live such a fast-paced life, we miss the physical cues that our body gives us to let us know that things are starting to, you know, um, build up in our bodies, that, headaches, feeling tired, not getting enough sleep, aches and pains, being short and being grumpy. Like these are all different signs. And I think in our world, we tend to find quick fixes for them, drink more coffee. We socialize a lot or, make time for lots of other things and not ourselves. And so it's almost like what you sort of introduced this topic to is that ultimately your body will just stop you dead in your tracks. Like one way or another, your body is going to just run out of fuel. And that's what the articles referred to as burnout. And when your body is not able to function at a level that, you've missed some of the cues. And so that's definitely what I saw. And I was reading the articles and I was like, yep, remember being there. And I don't know what it is about us that we continue to miss the clear signs. I don't know, Alyssa, if you were aware of any signs that you thought, oh, I mean, I guess you might have been because you did mention that, you had said to your husband, like, I can feel this ulcer. But what do you feel looking back on it, hindsight being 2020, do you see that there were some warning signs that either you recognized but didn't know what to do about it, or that it just came, it really somehow or other you minimized it and then now you're paying the price for it?
Yeah, I don't know that there was a specific like recognition of symptoms. I definitely knew that my plate was full. Like I definitely knew that my stress was at an all-time high and that it just I think I was having conversations with like my mom and my close friends and just saying like it's just too much. Like it just feels like too much. And then things just kept compiling. So I didn't notice it from a physical standpoint, but I definitely noticed it from like a psychological one of okay, this is too it's just getting too high of of a stress level for me.
And I will say that for me, I think because I've had issues since I was younger, I don't know if I was ever a good identifier of when things were getting too much. I have a really high tolerance for stress. And so what I would find is that I was really good under pressure. Like I was a good crisis worker. I could get things done under a lot of pressure. But then what I would find out is that my body would come to a screeching halt, like something would completely like disable me. And that was when I started to recognize a pattern of the fact that because I would always pride myself that I would get through something hard but then I wasn't happy when things just stopped. And that's when I started realizing like, oh, like this is not healthy. Like it's not just about getting through the stress period or hardship because I think that when you have a lifestyle that is really high stress, and I don't even mean this is well before I was in a job or in my career. This is just growing up and not knowing how to identify what it is that is causing me stress, or didn't even know that that was stress. Because for many of us, and what my mom and dad told me is like, this is the best time of your life. You just get to go to school and you have no responsibilities. And so, like, you should enjoy this time. And I didn't realize either the pressure I was putting on myself or the pressure that was being put on me one way or the other that I couldn't identify. And so, but I don't. What's interesting is that I feel like now I'm very aware of when I'm mentally exhausted. But back then, I had no idea I was mentally exhausted. Like you being able to identify like your plate's too full or that kind of thing. I think that's a really good skill to have because otherwise, I think I sort of feel like I was that way. I just was sort of always reeling from one thing to another, but not being able to put the pieces together very well.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of chuckle because I think the hard part is when you're in that, when you're noticing that there's too much going on, it's I think I wasn't able to put the brakes on enough to say, okay, I need to, you know, take take some time or I need to lessen this in some way. Like I don't think that I had the wherewithal to know that that's what I was trying to get at. Um, so it it's one of those things that I think that that's a piece of the puzzle that that you need to be one aware of it, but then two, you need to be able to say, okay, I'm aware of it, but now what do I do with that? You know?
Well, the other piece of it too is that identifying or understanding sort of the consequence of these behaviors is is wonderful, but I think it's also hard to ramp it back down just because you understand it like cognitively doesn't necessarily mean that your emotions or your behavior all fall into line like now immediately. And unfortunately, there is a lot of back and forth with it. I mean, I can't explain some of the things and why I did what I did. You should avoid certain foods. You should avoid certain triggers. You should, you know, find calming spaces. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that it has taken me 20 years to figure that out. I ate everything I wasn't supposed to eat. I didn't walk away from stress. I felt like there was a part of me that was like an adrenaline junkie. I think there was a lot of times where I needed to prove to myself that I could handle something, even though it was going to be really hard on me. And in the beginning, I don't want to say I didn't care, but I didn't understand the toll it was putting on my body. And I really regret that. I think there's a part of it that's denial. I think it's a part of us wanting to be overachievers and perfectionists. There was a part of me that I went through a process of, I'm not going to let this control me. I'm going to control it and try to fight it that way. I have been through like every phase of, I don't know what that is. Sometimes I thought it was, self sabotage and trying to, I don't know. I mean, and I would have never, on one hand, I was just going to say I would never do it intentionally, but in certain ways I did do it intentionally because I knew where it was going to lead to. And I didn't necessarily allow myself to find a way out. I just ended up being in the same spot. And there were many times where I thought, I mean, what is wrong with me that I continue to do this? I mean, it was, I had a very significant kind of experience when I had had so many ulcerations and they were afraid that, doing a colonoscopy was going to perforate my colon. And they said, you're at the 70th percentile of risk of cancer because of the amount of damage you've done to your intestines. And that I think was a wake up call, like 70th percentile. Like I haven't even hit 40 yet. And how is it possible that I could be at this condition? And I remember after I had because I have a reconstruction in my belly because I lost my whole colon. And my surgeon said to me, he said, I've never seen such a pitiful colon as I've seen with yours. He said it just was so limp and, just so damaged. And I guess you don't understand what the inside of your body looks like because we don't see it. And I wish that I had known the amount of damage I was doing. And, I was a young mom. My daughter was, I don't know, 3.5. I couldn't lift her for, so many months and because I had 2 extensive surgeries. And it changed my life because it forced me to realize that that was unsustainable. But it took a lot to get there. And it seems that I should have caught on a little bit faster.
I mean, I definitely hear all of that, and I think that we have a lot of that in common, like that perfectionistic and that mentality of like, just kind of go, go, go and being driven. And I think that there's probably a lot of people that can relate to that thought process. And like you were saying, like in some ways it does feel like it's, in your mind that you can only take so much, but you also know that you have to push yourself to achieve those things that you want to achieve. And I think that um that kind of the motivation, like, people who give up or don't push themselves may not achieve as much. And so it's like a double-edged sword in some ways, because if you push yourself to, excel and succeed in the things that you want to, the potential for you to get to that point, well, not to say that everyone who, they're going to get, a stomach ulcer or some sort of physical, physical manifestation of their stress. But I definitely think that it's also not something that happens just overnight, that it didn't happen because of one stressor. At least for me, it was, a multitude. And again, it's not just from stress, but I think that's one piece of it. That definitely exacerbates it. But I think that I'm correlating it because I think my stress got so strong that whatever was happening with my system, that just kind of pushed it over the edge. But I think that it wasn't something that, again, just happened. It was definitely the culmination of a lot. And so I hear everything that you're saying, and I'm sitting here relating, and I am not sure if other people can relate to it as well. But I think that it points out the fact that, we do need to slow down. We've been talking about that. but it's not so easy. And I think that maybe that's part of the conversation that we hadn't quite gotten to, but I'm glad that we're having it now because I hope that either, if somebody else is going through the same thing, they can relate. And maybe for somebody who, maybe is at the start of that can say, okay, this is what it looks like. And this, there's some things I need to do and put in place to make sure that I take care of myself.
And I do think, to your point, there's a lot of thinking that needs to happen. I mean, I think so much in our 20s and 30s, we're so driven to, we've been studying and we're trying to achieve our goals through education or whatever the goals were that we set out in front of us. And it's almost like a relentless pursuit of that. And I think that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's what we want. I mean, that's the end goal. And I think it's all about how do you get there and also being honest about, I think for me, it was a lot about, sort of proving my worth and proving who I was and wanting to be successful because of the choices I had made and feeling like I had let some people down in my family and then being an overachiever was going to compensate for this and that. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, you have to step back and say, what is it all for? And it felt a little shallow to me when I realized that I was what I was trying to do was to keep up with everybody else or prove that I was worth something because I had accomplished X, Y, and Z. And truly, as you get older and you realize that there's such little value in that, but that's what was made important to me, whether it was by, what I assumed was important, what I interpreted as being important, and I'm not putting all of that responsibility on people outside of me. I mean, I'm wired that way. And then it was just accelerated by the factors in my life. And so I think that was a combination that drove me in a very specific manner. And it is challenging because I think, like you're saying, and like I've said, like knowing that it's the right thing was not. I mean, I remember picking up meditation when I was recovering from my surgery. I had to stop working for 6 months, and because I had a two-part surgery, and it was a time where I didn't know what to do with myself. Um, uh, and I started meditating a lot at that time because every one of my doctors and the specialists and the wound care and everything else was talking about was, you've got to find a way. You've got to find a way to slow down, calm down. You've got to practice these different things. You have to take time for yourself. That's the most important thing because if your body stops working, everything else is going to shut down too. And it was such a dramatic turn of events in my life that it definitely made me stop and think. And, you know, that was how many years ago? I mean, that was a long time ago. My daughter's 20, it'll be 28 this year. So it's literally been 25 years ago that all of this started happening. And I had to figure out like what are the choices? What are the priorities? And it has taken me that long to try to put those pieces together in a way that I understand so much differently than I did back then. And it's really, I don't know. I could just be a slow learner. I'm sure that that's a component of it too. But it's not, cognitively, just because we understand, it doesn't mean that it translates to our body. And that realization takes work. And that's why, even though we've been talking about meditation and mindfulness and relaxation, that it's not necessarily our go to yet because it takes practice, it takes time, and it takes commitment. And there's so many things that fight us for all of those things that it's a natural progression until we can make it a daily part of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's one of those things where, it's you have to make the time for it too. And if you are already pulled pretty thin, it seems like, well, that might not be a priority to you. Um, I think that as I was listening to you, I had a lot of different thoughts, but I'm just kind of sitting over here nodding my head and thinking that I think also for us as we get older, we kind of learn from our own life lessons. And I can recall many instances where I had my plate very full, where I didn't get a stomach ulcer, or I didn't have like a physical response, where I just kind of was able to get over it. So I think that it probably took its toll. I'm going to be 40 this year, and so it one of those things where eventually your body catches up. And again, not to say that everybody's going to be in the same ballpark at 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 or beyond. I think that it's just one of those things where you might have, the first 5 times it doesn't happen, but that sixth time it does. But it definitely kind of shakes you in a way that says, "Hey, you need to do something different." And I think that this is one of those points where people start to look at, what like some of the things that you were saying, like what is it all for? Changing career sometimes happens at this point. Sometimes people take, that uh big leap into entrepreneurship or whatever it may be. I think that there's a lot of reasons why people shift gears, and this might be one of those reasons. Again, everybody kind of does things for their own purposes, but that's definitely one of those things that makes you in life when you have, you know, uh, I'm going to say a physical ailment or illness or something that makes you pause. I think that that's a good time to kind of reassess, where am I at? What do I need? Where do I want to go? And how do I ensure that doesn't happen again? For me, I'm sitting here like I don't want to go through this again. Because it's a challenge in a lot of different ways. And it, affect my ability to kind of show up the way that I want to uh as in my job, at home, as a mother, as a friend. All of those things are kind of impeded by it. So I think that there's a lot of different things that are impacted by that, but you definitely have to kind of assess like where am I going now?
And I also, the one thing I was thinking about too is that sometimes we don't even realize that like a maybe a minor decision can have an impact. I mean, like for example, as I've gotten older and I had a bone density test, which they tell you to do at a certain age or whatnot. And, I was told that I've got early signs of osteopenia or something, which means that there's bone loss. And so, it's like, oh, you need to do weight bearing exercises. And so, since I try to work out in the morning and I've been doing yoga now for, I don't know how many years in the morning, I decided, well, it's not realistic for me that I'm going to do yoga in the morning and sometime in the afternoon or evening or sometime I'm going to figure out how to do, weight bearing exercises. And so I stopped doing yoga and I start trying to do weight bearing exercises, which, like I love the idea of it. I mean, I would love to have sculpted arms and look like Michelle Obama, like bring that on. I'd love that. But that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of discipline. And so what I found is that I wasn't doing the weight bearing exercises because it was not something that I had fully, I think, embraced yet. But I really started to miss the yoga, and I didn't realize like how much that yoga helps me set the tone for the day. So I stopped doing the yoga. I wasn't doing the weight bearing exercises, and then I just found myself just being out of sorts. And not surprisingly, about 2 weeks ago, I had a physical reaction, and like my body was telling me like something is off here. And then, it's like I go all the way there. I get to the physical ailment, and then I'm like, I can't believe I'm here again. Like, how did I not see this happening? How did I not pay attention to my body telling me you're feeling out of sorts? Like you're not yourself. And so, but I did somehow or other, I missed that. And now here I am, like going to doctor's appointments, trying to figure out what's going on. And then I sit there and I'm like, you know what? I've been here before. Like, why? Why? And all for the sake of trying to do the right thing, right? And that I guess that's an example of me looking back yet again and saying, how did this happen? How did I allow this to happen again? And it was a small example, nothing compared to what I've been in other parts of my life. but definitely something that, once again, you're older, your body is not as strong as it used to be. You're trying to do the right things, but you also have to get to know what's best for you and pay attention and sort of stay the course of what is working for you. And, I feel like I'm going to continue to learn a version of this story, Alyssa. I'm afraid until forever. I'm just going to relive this sort of, and I kick myself for it, but I don't do it intentionally, but things get away from us, I guess, right? And we have to sort of like shore it back up and refocus and commit to it again.
Yeah, I definitely think that we kind of, we all kind of learn, unfortunately, in different ways. But I think that there's also, like you were saying, like as we get older, like different things change, and I think some of that we don't have control over. Like some of it is just kind of as we get older, things start to break down and whatnot. And so I think that there's a certain, acceptance of that as well that kind of impacts us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, as we continue to evolve, I think the biggest thing too, and I think this is part of, a lot of the teachings that I've tried to follow is that you have to be kind to yourself and you have to understand that we are not, you know, we are going to continue to life is gonna take its toll on us, right? I mean, we are an aging body, and though we want to do so many things and we want to continue, moving forward and the fast pace that we want to be able to live within, that you do have to understand that our body is a machine, and if you don't take care of the machine, if you don't give it good rest, if you don't feed it good food, if you don't exercise it regularly, if you don't grease the wheels, if you don't do all those things, that it's going to break down. And so I think that that's the one thing I keep learning over and over again is this understanding of you have to have resiliency not only in your mind and your soul, but also in your body. And I do think that it's really hard when you have a young family to really be able to limit the amount of activities you're in because, clearly um, the more responsibilities you have. And I think in certain ways, each child deserves their own time. And so you try to carve out that time. And so it just so many things going on. And then you have a relationship with your partner, you have a relationship with your family, you may have siblings, you have friends, you have coworkers. I mean, all these things. And I think at some point it just becomes to a place where you have to make some really difficult choices and find and also prioritize yourself. I mean, that's what I saw in the articles over and over again is how to carve out that time for yourself. And we've talked about that so many times, self-care and why we put ourselves last and the idea about using the oxygen mask as a metaphor. And if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. And there's such great, cognitive principles. Like we understand them in our brains. We understand what that means, translating that into action and being able to say no to something you really want to do, but you know that it's one more thing that you probably can't take on or it's going to push you over that limit. I mean, those are the times that are very, very difficult. And I know that, some of the exercises that I have done in my life in order to try to understand and accept is to really come up with like, what is your life statement or what is your family vision and really focusing on the things that are important to you and your family by definition. And that might help say no to some things because there's only so much time and you have to prioritize different things, whether it's for your children, for your spouse, for your immediate family. I mean, they're very hard to do because people who are high strung or type A personalities, perfectionists, hero children, whatever we call ourselves, we want to do everything and we want to do it, before we hit 30, before we hit 40. We want to, accomplish, so many things before a certain time. And that's all great, but something's got to give. And what is it that you're going to choose to give? And I think that's the hardest thing. And like we've started off this conversation saying, if you don't decide, your body will decide for you. And I think that's the crux of the issue. If you ignore the signs, then whether you like it or not, your body will make those decisions for you, and you won't have control over that. You will be subject to that force that is going to dictate what you can and can't do.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir over here. I'm like, absolutely. I mean, that's essentially where I'm at with my, young kiddos and trying to balance all the things. But I think that, this is just one of those things that hopefully again will open up the conversation for others who maybe haven't gotten to this point or are, kind of finding that, oh, that does sound like me. I am getting there. But I do think that unfortunately, it's a really hard lesson, but it is one that probably most people have to learn one way or another, whether it comes in the form of a stomach ulcer, or cancer, or heart attack, stroke. There's so many different things that will stop somebody in their tracks and really help them. I I don't mean to say help because it's such a hard situation to go through, but really assist in the way that you have to kind of make different choices. And if you have the opportunity to do that, it's almost a blessing in disguise in some ways too. So I really appreciate your perspective, Joji, because it does resonate a lot with me and where I'm at right now and hopefully with others as well.
Yep. And so definitely echoing what Alyssa said. I mean, if you're a person who is in the throes of life right now and and I think that, I think in your 20s and 30s, it's very fashionable to be stressed out. I mean, you got to keep up with everybody's stress. And I think that's part of unfortunately, I think that's part of the dynamic. And so I know there's a lot of people out there. I know we're not the only two who have struggled with this. And there's a lot of things in society that reinforce the behavior that push us to the edges of our sanity and our physical bodies. And so, please, catch yourself before you do, you find yourself in a spot like Alyssa or myself. Recognize where you are, take care of yourself and be good to yourself. And we're obviously out here to help out in any way we can. We love to hear from you guys. And several of you have reached out to share that a couple of the last episodes have been meaningful to you. And we appreciate that so much because that's important to us. And we know that our topics are connecting with you. Please continue to reach out in the ways that you like to do, whether it's through our email address at thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com or by, the Facebook community page and reaching out to our followers and to the group that now we've created within our little circle here, and or to Alyssa Marie and I directly. I mean, we'd love to hear from you. We're always interested in the topics that you think are most top of mind. And we continue to strive to create those conversations and give you a space to join us in thinking through some of these very complex issues that we as women face. So that's it for us for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, this is Alyssa Marie and I saying, talk to you later. Bye. Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you liked this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions? Or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.